In this Kotlin on Android development tutorial, we're going to describe how you can set up the MediaRecorder for video capture. Welcome to Mobile Application Tutorials. My name's Nigel. Okay, so we're moving forward in the series on how to capture video using the camera2 APIs. This is the second episode, and this is where we're going to set up the MediaRecorder and create the file where the MediaRecorder will save to. There's going to be no actual demonstration of the code in this particular one. It's just going to be writing a bunch of code, and I'll just explain what the code does as I write it down. Okay, and behind me we have my website here, and as you'll notice, this is number 2 in this episode. There'll probably be a number of premium videos being appended down the bottom there, but this will be the order that these videos will be released. They will be released on a weekly basis, and this series will start after the completion of the video preview series. And as you can see in the documentation, you do get the GitHub details. Members who buy this product, the camera2 API product, will get a helper video as well, describing how you can install this particular code and install it and get it running from the previous episode if you want, but I do recommend that you follow these episodes. And this particular plan is this particular product where you can buy the camera2 API series is for the price of $10 US, and there will be a link in the description. Okay, so we will make a start. So we're going to jump across to our Android Studio, and first thing I want to do is to go into our build.gradle file. Okay, I want to change the minimum SDK version to 26. And we will have to resync that. And the reason for this is I want to use one of the later APIs from the MediaRecorder, and it happens to start from version 26. Gradle's now completed. We can jump back into our preview fragment file. Okay, I want to create a couple of variables. We'll create them at the top up here. First one will be for the actual MediaRecorder itself. And this one's going to be a value, and we'll just call it the MediaRecorder. And we're going to call the lazy delegate future. So this will get initialized and created at a later stage. Okay, and from here we can just pass in our MediaRecorder object. So when this first gets called, that's when the initialization and the creation of the MediaRecorder instance will happen when we call it. So it's going to happen in the future, and it's provided to us and as a lazy delegate. Okay, I'll create one more, and we'll call this private. This is going to be, I'm going to use a late init for this one. So this will get initialized at a later stage when we first going to pass in a value here. And what this value is I'm going to call it current video file path. And we do have to specify this type for our late init, and it will be a string of the type string. And this is just going to basically save the path for our video file, so we will need that path for getting the file back if we want to share it, and that will happen in a later episode. Okay, so these are probably the only two values and variables I will create in this particular episode. And so what we're going to do is create a file name first, so I'll just scroll on down for a place to do that. I'll do it here. You can put it in anywhere. Okay, so we'll call this private function. So we'll create the file name first. And it will return the type of a string, as you would expect for a file name. And one thing to be aware of, when we create a file name, it's going to be a unique file name. In other words, file name is going to be different every single time. And to help us with that, I'm going to create a timestamp. So I'll create a value for that. To create timestamp, I'm going to use SimpleDateFormat. And then just pass in the format of the SimpleDateFormat, which will be month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, something to that. You can look in the documentation for the different formats you can use. Then we need to format that, and I'm going to format that with the date format. Okay, and then it's just a matter of returning our file name. So I'm just going to prepend the name video in front. Now I'm going to call a string template on our timestamp, and I'm going to append the file type, which will be MP4. Okay, so that's going to be the actual name of our file name. Let's step on down below. If we're going to create a file name, let's create a file. So I'll call this create video file. And I just want to touch up this name slightly because in following tutorials I could be creating an image file, so I'm just going to call this video file. It's just to separate these two names. And there is a typing in that, spelling mistake. Okay, so we'll create a video file, and this is going to be a file, so it's going to return the type of file. And I'll get the library for that. On the Mac, it's Alt-Enter. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just to create the video file. So we'll create a value for that. I'll call it video file. We're going to create a new file, so we can call the file object. I'm going to call context. It's going to be a null-safe call files directory. And so what this is doing is I'm basically saying I want these files to be private to the application itself. So no other application will be able to get access by themselves to these particular video files. But we can share them for a file provider if we want. But at the moment, we're just going to keep these files private to the application. And one thing to be aware of, if you keep files private to the application, if you uninstall the application, the files get removed as well. So that's a consideration you will have to be aware of. Okay, and then it's just a matter of calling create video file name. Okay, and now we can set our current video file path. Call video file and get the absolute path from that, and then we just need to return the video file. Okay, so this portion of the Kotlin and Android episode has completed. We've created a file name and we've created a file. Now I'm going to set up basically a map of default orientations just to put the correct offsets in our recording, because the actual camera in portrait mode does have certain offsets and we have to calibrate those offsets. So we're just going to put in some values prior to that calibration. Okay, so I'll call the first one private value, and this will be the sensor. I'll call the sensor default orientation degrees. It will be 90, and we do have to create one for the inverse as well. They do have inverse values, and I'll call this inverse. We'll make this 270. It will have to be 270. Okay, now I'm going to set up some sparse interarrays and just have values for the different offsets. It could be 90, 180, 270. You get the point. Okay, so private value, and I'll call this default orientations. and it's going to be of the type sparse int array. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to call it apply. Use the Kotlin lambda. And basically we can just apply all the functions inside this object to this object. So instead of us calling default orientation and the function itself, we can just call them inside here. So we can call append, and inside here we'll just be passing a key for each one. So we call surface, rotation 0, and then passing these values here. So they're going to have to be done in this order. And so I've got 4 values here that I will need to reset up. And this will be 90. That will be 0. This will be 180. This will be 270. And this will be 270, 180. Quick double check of that, that looks okay. And we will have to do the same for the inverse orientations as well. So I've just made a copy of that. I'm going to have to change the name to inverse orientation. And I just need to change these values here. So the first one will be 270. Okay, there's a certain pattern to this. It sort of goes down. 180, 90, and 0. Okay, so these are our offset orientation mappings complete. Now we want to set up the orientation hint values to the MediaRecorder. So what I need to do here first is to go to our camera characteristics here. I'm just going to pass in another value to support here. And this is so we can get the orientation of the actual sensor itself. So make a copy of that. Change that to sensor orientation. Okay, and now I'm just going to create a new function here. Private, and we'll call this setup MediaRecorder. So this is where we're going to set all the settings for our MediaRecorder. First value I want to get is actual orientation of the display screen itself, not the sensor, but the display screen. So I'll create a value for that, and we'll call this value rotation. We can get that by calling our activity. Will have to be a safe call. Then window manager, again a safe call. And default display, another safe call with rotation. Okay, and now we'll get a value for our sensor orientation. So we have a little bit of help code now that we've created for that. Okay, so we can call our camera characteristics function, and inside here we need to pass in the orientation for either the forward or rear camera. So we want the rear camera. So to get the rear camera, call the camera ID and pass in the lens facing back attribute there. And then we will have to specify the sensor orientation as well. So camera characteristics, the sensor orientation. So this will now return us the sensor orientation. So now we can actually set up the changes to the MediaRecorder. So we'll use our Kotlin when and pass in the sensor orientation. And we'll do a check for the sensor default degrees first. And we can now call out MediaRecorder set orientation hint, and now we can call our default orientation sparse array, do a get on the rotation value, and it will have to be a safe call there. Okay, and we'll do the same for the inverse as well. This will be inverse orientation, get, and again on the rotation, and make sure you do this save call there. Okay, so we've now set the orientations to our media recorder. And now we're going to set a bunch of settings to our media recorder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the apply again. So that's just going to allow us to call the object functions and then apply them back to the media recorder instance itself. And so I'm going to need to use reference here because there's a bunch and I don't have a great memory. So the first one will be the media source, and now we need to pass in the media recorder. This will be a video source, and it's going to be the surface of the media recorder, and so this is what we'll get passed in the following tutorial for when we set up the capture session for the media recorder. The next one's going to be set output file, and this will be the output file that we've created. So create video output file, we'll return the output file for that. And the following one will be, actually I'll put one above here, set output format. We'll call the media recorder. Look for output format, and output format will be MPEG for that. And the following one will be set video encoding bitrate. This is going to be a big number. I'm going to put 7 zeros here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, if it's any less than that, you'll get poor video quality. So if you do get poor video quality, this is what you want to check for the encoding bitrate here. Okay, and then we'll put the frame rate. I'm just going to keep this default as 30, and then set video size. And we'll go for a good quality size. To set the width to 920, full HD we will go for. And finally set video encoder. I need to call a media recorder, video encoder. And I'll use the H.264. And finally, once you've set up all of those, we'll prepare our media recorder. Once this media recorder has been prepared, it's now in a position for capturing to start and stop by calling media recorder start and stop. Now we'll add a function to stop the media recorder. Just scroll up here so you can see easier. So what we can do here is call the media recorder, and again we can call the apply. So we want to apply the methods inside the media recorder and apply them to the media recorder. Okay, so we're going to want to call stop, and we will need to call reset as well, so it can be reused again for recording. Okay, and I just want to check the help, so I select stop, press F1. I'll highlight this. Basically you can get an illegal state exception. Once it can happen if you press stop before you actually press start recording, or it can happen in case you don't actually recapture a valid stream, or if you press stop very quickly after start. So there's a number of reasons why you might get an illegal state exception. So we're going to put a trap harness around that just to catch if we do get that illegal state exception. So I'll just highlight these two and try and catch that. And so it's an illegal state exception. And down here, oh, yep, that we'll log that actually. So we'll log that as an exception in case one of those cases does happen where we don't capture a valid video stream. And that completes this episode of the Kotlin camera2 API video capture portion, where we set up the settings for the MediaRecorder. We did have to do a fair bit of coding just for our orientations. The camera does sensor is at a certain orientation. It displays it in orientation. So we did have to code in offsets and apply that to the MediaRecorder as well as applying the settings and the actual file we want to save to as well. And so this will complete this episode. The following episode will actually be capturing a video file. So keep a lookout for that one. So you want to click on that subscribe button and the bell icon if you haven't already, so you get notified of the tutorials that I'm working on. And please note that I'm extremely busy. I do get sent lots of technical questions, and I just don't have enough time left in my current lifetime to read those questions, besides trying to draft a response. But I do provide access for you to get hold of me, and that's in Code Mentor, where I do provide paid sessions. If you're willing to pay for them, I will free up time to help you out with whatever you're working on. And I do make my announcements on Facebook and Twitter as well. The handle's just above there. Anyway, thank you for taking the time for watching this one. Bye for now.